So in a previous video we made this thing, which is a drought wall radiator. Now I'll put the link to the video up here so that if anybody wants to actually see that video but hasn't seen it yet, then they can have a look at it. Now, this was brought to mind actually by a friend of mine, Michael, who was talking about some of this stuff. And I thought that I'd better do a follow-up video on this, because the previous video was really how to do it. It was all constructional stuff. Now, there are two sides to any of this stuff in our modern society. And that's really unfortunate, but it's also the way it is. The first side is all the constructional stuff, how to get out there and do it, and the first video covered that. The second side is all the legal stuff. Now, I think this is actually ideal for setting up a business of some kind. So, you know, painting up plastic sheets to make underfloor heating, painting up various shapes to make wall heaters, painting directly on the wall. There's just an endless amount of things you could do with it. And it's caused a lot of interest, as I thought it might, because it's a really good application of some of the weird sounds that we get up to on the other videos. But still, if you're going to step out there into the world and decide you're going to sell this, then you have a whole host of other different things that you have to start thinking about. I mean, the first thing to think about is making it, and does it work? Well, that's obvious, yes it does. The second thing to think about is all of the legislation in place. Now, we have a lot of legislation in place, particularly in the West, and particularly around electronic devices. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. I personally think that politicians have a view of themselves that they're product of laws, so when there aren't any to pass, they sit around thinking of a few that they could come up with, and the ones that they really favour are the ones that cost nothing but make a pain in the arse for everybody else. And to a greater or lesser extent, that's the view I have of a lot of this legislation. But it doesn't help having that view. The fact is, it's there. And being there, you have to comply with it, particularly if you're going to sell this in a business situation. Now, in England, which is the one that I'm going to talk about because that's the one that I know, then we have something called the IET Wiring Regulation, 17th edition. Now, it covers most of Europe because those editions came out to regularise between Europe and England. But there are still variations depending on where you're from. And now I know that this video is watched by people from all over the world, not only America, England and Europe. Everybody watches this. Your regulations are going to change depending on the area that you're in. So the first caveat you're going to have to think about when you think about doing this kind of thing is what regulations do you actually have? Now, that particular device is constructed in a way that's something we call Class 2. Class 2 means it's doubly insulated. It means that there's actually two layers of insulation there. So if the first layer fails, you've got the second layer to protect you. So if you do something, for instance, like scratch off the first layer, there's another layer to protect you. If you do something like try to drill through it, then that's actually reinforced, so it's a bit harder to drill through than it looks like. So you need to think about what class of equipment that you're going to do. Now, if you do this as a standalone installation, so you paint somebody's walls and you plug it directly into the mains, in the UK you can only do that if you are something referred to as a competent person. That's actually the way the law is stated. You have to be competent. Now, the restrictions on what qualifies you as competent are interpretive. So you can have many years' experience as an electrician, that would make you competent. You can hold a qualification, that will make you competent. There's loads of ways of judging how somebody is competent, but you have to be competent if you're going to play around with house electrics and wire this directly into the mains. If you're not a competent person and you attempt to do that, then the onus of responsibility is not on me for supplying you the ink, it's on you for having put it into the mains without being competent. Now, that doesn't have an effect particularly on me, but it will have an effect on you. If you do something like this and you're not competent and somebody gets injured, you're going to have a huge problem on your hands. So if you want to do something like this and you want to install it as a device that is connected directly to the supply circuit, depending on the location you're in, you're going to have some element of competency associated with your ability to wire a device like this directly into the main supply. Now, I don't think it's that difficult. But then in terms of the IET regs, I am a competent person, so I don't have a problem with it. Now, you don't have the same sort of problems of competency if you produce these as standalone devices. So say you take a sheet of some kind of material, paint the reverse of it, and then supply it with a plug and a controller so that other people can plug it into their mains. Then you won't have that same sort of qualification needed for doing something directly to a main circuit. However, your product still needs, certainly in the West, to be certified as safe. And we have a whole set of rules and regulations that we have to follow in order to get any product that we supply to the market as certified as safe. That certification is actually the responsibility of an external lab. So say I wanted to produce radiators that people could hang on their walls. I'd have to design it, produce it, and send it off for safety testing and certification before I could even begin to sell it. And that's the problem with a lot of these things. It's never as simple as it first appears. Doing it as a one-off, well, that's really easy. I mean, I'm here in my lab by myself. I can paint up the wall as happy as I like. I put it on a plug. It's an appliance. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to dismantle it if it's any trouble to me, and so on and so on. It means that I don't have to have the same worries that somebody would have to have if they were doing a business out of this thing. Now, that ink that I painted that with is actually an astonishingly simple thing if you think about it. But it's taken me about 1.5 years to actually develop it. Now, the last year has been spent in getting its safety certificates. It has to be certified. I have to get a manufacturer's safety data sheet on that. I have to test it for stability. I have to make sure that if you drink it, you're not going to kill yourself. I have to make sure how long it's going to last. And there's a whole host of regulations I have to comply with to put any product on the market. So when you buy that from my shop, you can be sure that I've gone through all of that stuff. Now, the problem with that stuff is it's not a cheap thing to do. These tests cost hundreds of pounds. It costs me £300 to £600 every MSDS I have to have written. I can't write an MSDS, I have to have a competent person write MSDSs for me, so I pay an agency to write them for me, and they do all the testing of the safety of the ink, and then they write an MSDS saying how safe that ink actually is or isn't and how to go around handling it. And this is all part of the legislation that I have to comply with in order to put that ink onto the market. Now, if you're going to build a device, you're going to have a similar set of legislations, again, depending on the locality that you're in. There will be requirements for that you meet before you can put these things on the market. Now, if you're going to produce underfloor heating as a standalone appliance or radiators as a standalone appliance, then the safety testing mark is going to depend on the kind of safety elements you put into this. The easiest thing to do, and the thing that I went for, is something called the Class 2. The Class 2 is, as I say, just means it's doubly insulated, so there's no possibility of you being able to touch, no reasonable possibility of you being able to touch the live elements. Because, of course, if you're determined to get in there, you're going to get in there. If you really want to damage yourself, there's no way of stopping you. The wires that you can see leading in there were installed by a site electrician who is employed by the people who actually own this building that I'm in, that I rent it for, and he's a competent person. If I wanted to get into those wires, all I actually have to do is take a pair of wire snips and cut through, and that will get me into them and also blow me up. So there's no way of stopping somebody who is dumb enough to do such things from doing such things. The requirement is to do it with an applicable level of safety. So those wires are actually in a piece of conduit, making it that bit more difficult for me to get into. If I knock it with anything, I might damage the conduit, but the likelihood of me damaging the insulation underneath is much, much lower. And again, that would depend what I hit it with. If I hit it with a crossbow bolt, I'm pretty sure to go through it. But it's applicability and likeliness that you're actually really, really interested in. You don't have to worry about it being ultimately safe for all conditions, for all time, forevermore. We're certainly within Europe, we have an idea of personal responsibility. So if you take a toaster, which is a Class 2 device with a couple of slots in the top, and you can see the live wires just by looking down, they're the ones that are glowing red. It's actually quite easy to get into those. But if you take a fork and stick your fork in there and give yourself a shock and attempt to sue the toaster manufacturer, then within Europe you're not going to have much joy, because the European courts certainly have a sense of, or a degree of, personal responsibility. Everybody knows it's a dumb thing to do to stick a fork in a toaster. If you go right ahead and do that, they're going to blame you, not the toaster manufacturer. So you have a degree of responsibility within Europe for your own behaviour when it comes to these things. And that's reflected in the safety requirements for the product that you produce. So as long as you produce one that is reasonably compliant to Class 2 and passes its safety regulations, and somebody attacks it with a chainsaw and goes right the way through and blows himself up, you're going to be fine because you've done all the compliance that's required and it's within reason safe. If you don't do that compliance and somebody does that with a chainsaw, it's you who's going to be held responsible. So you need to make sure that any product you design and anything you put onto the market has gone through that safety checking procedure. Now, that's all just part of the problems of bringing something to market. When you develop something, it's only half of the job. Bringing it to market is the other half of the job, and that can be a long and tortuous road when you set off down it. Now, I don't want to discourage anybody setting off down that road because it's an exciting and adventurous road and will certainly help you get your business up and going and up and running and get you selling and working on something that is actually a lot of fun to work on. But we have to recognise that we work within a set of regulations, a set of laws that are enforced on us from the outside for whatever reason. They're still there and we have to work within them. So you're going to have any appliance or device that you construct safety tested at least before you begin to sell it. If you want to do a standalone installations of this stuff, then you're going to have to make sure that you're trained to do those installations by sitting a competent person certificate of some kind that's relevant within your country. I'm old enough to remember apprenticeships. So we used to have apprenticeships here in the UK. If you want to become an electrician, you became an electrician's apprentice. It's changed over the years. There are now various courses. City and Guilds has actually more or less disappeared, and now various courses that are supposedly equivalent that you can take to gain yourself that level of competency. There are crash courses you can take as well, so you can pay a few £1,000s and take a crash course in this to become a competent person. But if you're going to work certainly within, I think the US as well require this. The US and Europe, you need a level of competency that you're going to have to be able to assure that you've got people. Now, having said all of that, the thing that you've actually seen is actually not that new. There is a whole host of new materials out there called carbon thin film heaters. They're mostly used for underfloor heating, and what you've seen here is actually just a redesign of those underfloor heating mats using the heat resistive ink and hanging it on the wall, but it's actually the same technology. Now that's what's referred to as mature technology. It's not a new technology, it's a few years old, so a lot of the bugs have been worked out. So if you want to know what kind of things you ought to be doing, then all you really have to do is have a look to see what carbon thin film manufacturers are doing and how they go around installing those. You will be not surprised to note when you look at that the way I installed that thing is actually the same way that the underfloor heating was installed. So as long as you're installing in the same manner as the underfloor heating mats that are installed, you're going to comply with the regulations, or at least you're going to be pretty sure that you are. Anyway, all of this was brought to mind courtesy of a conversation that I was having with a friend, and I hope it was useful and of interest to you. And thank you very much for watching.